shop auctions for at-risk horses, I usually don't end up buying ones this young. But last year when I was attending one of my favorite auctions, this little girl had nobody bidding on her. The auctioneer called and nobody bid, and I ended up getting her for only $25. She was sold loose, so she came with minimal information, but I was able to track down the area that she came from. She was brought in from somewhere off of the Crow Reservation. There are hundreds of free-roaming horses on this 2.2 million acres. When there's enough grass, the horses do very well on their own, but unfortunately, here in Montana, we were experiencing an extreme drought, which was made worse by a plague of grasshoppers. Instead of letting them starve to death out on the range, some of these horses were gathered and taken to the auction. While there is no easy solution to this problem, it does give horses like this little girl a chance at a normal life. These horses off the reservation are usually extremely fractious because they haven't been around people. They are typically not the kind of horse that a lot of people want to invest their time and money in, even if they are extremely cheap at the auction. I wanted to make sure that this little girl understood that I wasn't going to hurt her, so I started in fairly slowly with getting her to accept touch. After a few sessions, she had calmed down to where I could pet her with my stick and she wasn't being overly reactive. The first couple days that she was at my place, she was trying to jump out of these panels and get away, which is not uncommon for a horse like this.
There you go.
The next step for her was learning to give to pressure, which I did one step at a time.
That's a good girl.
Even though she was still pretty afraid of me, she was learning what I was teaching her at a pretty swift pace. I always quarantine my new horses, and this is one of the reasons why. This girl developed a draining tract on her forehead. It was probable that it was a sinus infection that was draining through one of the suture lines in her skull bones. Being gathered and sold at auction so young exposes these horses to a lot of diseases. They are under an extreme amount of stress, and this can cause them to decline very rapidly. Technically, she was probably old enough to be weaned, but I wanted to make sure she had all the nutrition that she needed, so I put her on a full starter pellet. To give her the best chance at survival, we aggressively treated her with antibiotics and anti-inflammatories. After a few sleepless nights, she finally started looking better. I was hoping to get this girl halter broke before winter, but when the first big storm came, she was not ready. Thankfully, I have a lot of experience with unhandled horses, and I am pretty good at maneuvering my trailer to where she can just run right on. With a little bit of encouragement, she was on the trailer and I could move it the 100 yards across the parking lot and put her in the barn. I set up some panels in the barn and secured the trailer door so she could just run off the trailer and into her stall. I gave her some time to just be a horse, but after her antibiotics were done, I found her a friend. I could tell by her behavior that she had been away from her mother for quite some time before the sale. She was brave and sassy, and I finally decided on her name of Scarlet. Because she was now healthy, I was able to start back in with her halter training. Although we had done this before, she was more worried with me in an enclosed space. I took my time so neither of us would get hurt, and pretty soon she started to settle down. I have trained a bunch of Mustangs, and she was very similar to a Mustang colt. She was tolerating me pestering her pretty well, and then I noticed she had blown another abscess. She also had a pocket of infection or a hematoma on her hind end that came out of nowhere, and we were concerned that she had some sort of systemic infection. Due to her limited handling, we were only able to use oral antibiotics and treated her again very aggressively, hoping that it would knock out the infection. She eventually made a full recovery, and I was able to get back to handling her every day. I didn't handle her at all through her illness, but when she was finally on the other side of it, I think she realized that I wasn't going to hurt her. She got to go out in her little round pen during the day and then into her stall through the barn at night. Her training at this point was not very serious. I just went in her pen a few minutes every day when the weather wasn't horrible, and eventually she started figuring out that being with me was really where she wanted to be. This is an enormous step for a wild horse. Some people may think that 60 days is a really long time to make this happen, but after her illness, I did not want to push her too fast. Her hematoma and the abscess on her fetlock had gotten better, so I decided to go back in and work on giving to pressure again. She was still pretty worried about everything that was going on around her, so I decided I would give her a break. She was so nervous that she would start to sweat, and it was taking her too long to dry. I was worried her infection would come back, so I gave her the winter off. She spent a ton of time over the winter just getting to be a horse. She did seem to have trouble just quieting her mind, so I started her on this powder. It is basically the same protein that mothers produce to calm their foals. I hadn't used this product before on a horse, but they make a similar one for dogs and cats that seems to work really well. At this point, she is off the milk replacer pellets and on a growth feed. She's also getting some vitamin E and some flaxseed oil. She got the milk powder for 2 weeks, and I think that it really did help her calm down and just relax. We had some insane storms this spring in Montana, including this crazy snow cyclone. Weather like this really makes it difficult to train a young fractious horse, so she got the entire winter off pretty much. By April 1st, all of the horses started shedding, so spring was hopefully going to arrive soon. With the weather getting nicer and nicer, Scarlet was able to spend more time outside. I think my decision to let her just be a horse all winter really paid off. She used to get spooked easily at things happening outside of her pen, and now she is more comfortable and curious investigating me. It has taken her about 6 months to get up to this point. And since she is so brave and curious, it is the perfect time to get back in with her halter training. My YouTube channel is just a few months old at this point, and I thought it was the perfect opportunity for me to show you guys what I do with her every single day throughout her halter training. It was a ton of work for someone who didn't know anything about editing, and I'm also pretty bad at time management, but in the end, it was a really fun project. I will link the playlist below in case you guys haven't seen it and you want to check out how she improved on a daily basis. Throughout her halter training, she had this horse Stewie as a companion. With his help, she gained even more confidence and got brave enough to start figuring out how she could escape from her pen during the day.
You doing, little girl?
Even though she found the halter training process stressful at some point, she still was fairly outgoing and very brave. She made improvements every session. Her hair coat was starting to have a really nice shine to it. At some points I felt like I wasn't getting anything done, but in the end she learned a lot for the 30 days that I did the halter training series with her. By the end she could pick up her feet, I could lunge her both directions, she would stand still while I scratched her, and I introduced her to my dog. The other horses were ready to go out on spring pasture, so Stewie unfortunately had to leave her. She was starting to learn how to be confident all by herself and continued to surprise me with how well she was able to retain information and build upon it session after session. Throughout the spring, she had several growth spurts. After I had had her for about 9 months, I figured that this was about the time she was born. I went ahead and marked her birthday as July 1st just so I could keep track of her growth. At this point, it looked like she had finally caught up to whatever deficit she experienced early in her life. She had a healthy hair coat, she was gaining lots of muscle mass, and growing pretty balanced. I've seen a lot of horses come off of different reservations around Montana, and she is one of the best looking colts that I've seen. Throughout the summer, I handled her 2 to 3 days a week, just reinforcing all of the things that she already knew. She has always had trouble with me getting her halter off and putting it back on, so I started giving her treats every time I did it, and I think it's really helped her a lot. As she got more comfortable with me taking her halter on and off, I decided that I would go ahead and move her to the barn more regularly so she could get used to being in a run with a stall for the winter. It did take her about a week to calm down. The neighbors have a bunch of cows, so she was finally able to get a look at them, and she was super interested in what they were doing. Since this girl did have some problems jumping over the panels when I first got her, I decided that the regular fence in this pen was not strong enough to hold her, and I would just worry about her too much unless she had something more solid. I also leave that pink collar on her all the time. It's got my information on it in case she ever does happen to get loose. It is a breakaway collar, so I'm not worried about her getting it caught on anything. She really started bonding with this guy again. They had been friends when I very first got her, and as time went on, she got pretty comfortable in her new setup. There were some times throughout this last year that I wondered why I ever bought this horse. She was a lot more work than a domestic
girl.
horse, and she's still got a long way to go, but I know that I was only a few people at the sale that day that could give her the life that she has now. When I brought her home, she was 365 pounds. Now she weighs around 875. She was much smaller than this horse when I first got her, and now she's just a hair bigger than him. She is currently 14 two hands, and I'm thinking she'll probably finish around 16 hands. I'll be really interested to see what she looks like after the winter is over and what discipline she might excel at. If you would like to see more updates on this little girl over the winter, drop a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching this girl's journey, and stay tuned for the next video.